of light. It is a river of light of light. Good boy. Hey everybody, Elliot here, Lazy Dogs Records. And there's all the tags going around. Of course, everybody in the VC's been seeing those. So Mazzy just started one that's right up my alley, and he calls it the Folk Music Tag 2021. And I've seen Nick's version, I've seen Mazzy's, and I'm going to attempt to do one myself. So 20 questions. I think I can pretty much answer these. There's one or two that I maybe slightly tweaked to make it fit, but pretty much everything. But what is folk music? Oh, one of the great questions of our lifetime. Well, there are lots of different definitions for what folk is, and some people can hear something and identify it and say that's folk, and other people may well very much disagree. There's usually a loose interpretation, and that's what we're doing here, very loose, general understanding of what folk is. And then there's a very strict, rigid one. And I like both, actually, but I'll tell you my rigid definition of folk. Folk is any music that is made by people in an informal setting for no profit. That's folk music. If you get together with your friends and you have stringed instruments and you play together for fun for you and your friends, that's folk music. If you play horns and jazz in an informal setting, that's folk music. If you strum the guitar and play old songs, that's folk music. If you strum a guitar and play new songs in that informal setting, that's folk music. It's all folk music. If you hook up electric amps and have Fenders and Stratocasters and Gibson Les Pauls and a big drum kit and all that, and you do it in that informal setting, it's still folk music. If you now take whatever setting you had for you and your friends informally and for no profit, and you go to the local pizza parlor and set up to play for tips and beer, it's not folk music anymore. Okay? That's my strict interpretation of folk. But that's not really what we're dealing with here. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, so show a pre-1950s folk album. I would call this a folk album. Charlie Poole and the North Carolina Ramblers. This is on County Records, a really good record label that reissued a lot of stuff. Old time songs recorded from 1925 to 1930. Charlie Poole, and there's 4 editions of these. There's volume 1, 2, 3, and then one of them doesn't say volume 4 or 2 or whatever, but it's a continuation of the series. So Charlie Poole and the North Carolina Ramblers, a string band that influenced a lot of music to come later, bluegrass and rock and things like that. Okay, an archival or field recording. I'll show this one. This is a recent issue. I picked this up this year or last year. I think it came out in 2018. Fiddler Noir. Fiddler Noir. And this is on Old Hat Records. And it's a archival recording, I guess. They gathered old 78s of African American fiddlers, early phonograph records from 1925 to 1949. So this is taking those old 78s. I love that picture there. And fiddle tunes, very much folk music. Of course, all these people were recording, hoping to get rich as an artist from Charlie Poole to these African-American fiddlers. Most of them didn't. Some of them made a little bit of money. Okay, number 3. Recent, meaning after 2010, what you'd consider a folk album that's come out. In 2019, Molly Tuttle, great acoustic guitarist, came out with When You're Ready. And she's normally lumped into the category of bluegrass, but really her albums, at least so far done as solo, are really more folk, modern folk. She's a great guitarist. This thing came in red, if that matters to anybody. And it's on Compass Records. Molly Tuttle, a great guitarist. Highly recommend her work. But her solo albums aren't really bluegrass albums. They don't fit that bluegrass structure normally. Some of her albums that she does with others do. Okay, number 4, a male folk album. Well, if you're going to show a folk album from a male artist, you're either going to go with Leadbelly or Woody Guthrie. And this is that great Folkways label. Woody Guthrie sings Folk Songs Volume 2 with Cisco Houston and Sonny Terry. This is, I don't know what year. Well, I can tell you. I'll look right here. I always put the year on here. This came out in 1964, of course. These are recordings from before that, probably. Don't know that for sure, though. But Woody Guthrie, probably, if you looked up folk music in a dictionary, there his picture would probably be there. Then a female folk artist. This is one of my favorites. And this album was reissued in 2018, also from Folkways Records, Elizabeth Cotton. Beautiful, delicate guitarist. This is called Folk Songs and Instrumentals with Guitar. Elizabeth Cotton, beautiful guitarist. And of course, Freight Train is her most well-known song. And what's the other one that's, Oh Baby, It Ain't No Lie. Sugary, that's another one that's not actually not on this album. She does Spanish Flang Dang on here though, and Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, Wilson Rag. Okay, Elizabeth Cotton, great guitarist, discovered by, I believe, Mike Seeger and his wife. She's from North Carolina, and had, like so many African Americans from North Carolina, she moved up north in search of a better life, and jobs, employment, and things like that. And D.C. is one of the first places folks in the migration, black migration out of the South from the eastern seaboard went, and she was working as a domestic, which means she was the maid and babysitter for the Seegers, and there was a guitar laying on the bed, and she would pick up the guitar while she was cleaning house or taking care of the children and stuff, and she would play. And one day, I believe Mrs. Seeger came in and she was playing and went, "Wow, we're folklorists, you know that, don't you?" And then you're like, "Hey, wait, well, let's see what we can do." And her career started very late in life as a result of that. And let's see, a duo or trio. Okay. This fits both duo and trio. And that would be the Carter family. Why does it fit both? Because they said oftentimes when they were playing live, AP was kind of, I don't know if he was dealing with some mental health issues, or I think it was really some depression and things like that. But they would be playing live, doing live shows, and in the middle of the show, AP would just walk off stage and wander off, and he didn't know where he went, or just went and walk around outside or something in the middle of the show. And Sarah and Maybelle became a duo then. They kept playing and kept doing the show, and it was a duo while he was gone. And maybe he would show back up a little later and grab his guitar and get right back in there. Okay, and a group. If you're going to talk about the folk revival of the 1950s, 60s, you'd have to, this one would be one that you would probably think of pretty quickly. The New Lost City Ramblers, urban, highly educated young men taking up the bluegrass, not the bluegrass, that was part of it, taking up the folk music from outside of their experience. They were looking at the transcriptions, things like that, listening to old field recordings and stuff. Mike Seeger, Tom Paley, and Mike Seeger's who discovered Elizabeth Cotton, and John Cohen are on this, and this is a Folkways album. And what year was that? I think it was 58. That was from 1958. Okay. And an acoustic album. Okay, I picked this one. And this is called a group called Poor Richard's Almanac. And they're basically a bluegrass band featuring Sam Bush, National Junior Fiddle Champion. This is when Sam Bush was very young. Let's see what year this one. I'm thinking like 69. Yep, 69. Came out in 69. And basically, Alan Mundy was a banjo player, and he met Sam Bush out in Oklahoma or somewhere at a music park, and jammed with him some. And he had gotten drafted, but before he had to report in, he travels to Kentucky. And I think Sam Bush he's just a really young kid, teenager. And he and Wayne Stewart, and they form a trio. And started playing kind of casually. And this was recorded on Easter weekend, 1969. Alan Mundy ends up having to report for duty. And when he does, Courtney Johnson replaces him in the band. It didn't last that long, but they were around for a while, and this would eventually they would form Newgrass Revival after doing a stint with a couple of other bluegrass bands. Okay, and let's see. Acoustic, an electric folk. Okay, one of the great folk singers. He's trying to avoid the draft, so he moved to Canada. And until 1976, when Jimmy Carter pardoned those that evaded the draft and moved to Canada, he could not come back into the United States. But after that, he was able to. Jesse Winchester. And this is Let the Rough Side Drag. And he's got drums on here. He's got keyboards, pedal steel, saxophone, violin, piano, stuff that would, it's not just your straight, a couple of guitars strumming or something like that. So I think that would qualify. And number 10, a live album. I'm gonna bend the rule a little bit on live album. This isn't before an audience, but this is recorded live in the studio by himself with no overdubs and a sheet of plywood under his feet, which he tapped out. He provided his own percussion, and that is John Hartford's Mark Twain, one of my favorite favorite albums of all time. And I think this would qualify as a folk album. It's not. It's very experimental in its simplicity and in some ways complex. A piece of particle board, not plywood, particle board actually. There's a piano pickup attached to a piece of particle board that's raised up slightly, and that's where he gets his percussion, and uses a new GTR banjo, Hearts and Flowers model, tuned low, he said, and the guitar was a Noble, and the fiddle didn't have any label at all on it. So the great John Hartford. I think that's a folk album in the broad sense. And let's see, number 11, up to 3 folk labels. Well, among the folk labels, this is a Riley Puckett album, County, reissue of stuff from a long time ago, from the Skillet Lickers, Gil Tanner and the Skillet Lickers. Riley Puckett was a long-time member of that, blind guitar player, very good. County Records released a lot of stuff that we would call folk. And this is Slim Richie's Jazzgrass, and this is on Ridge Runner Records. So Ridge Runner, there's the name there. Ridge Runner was a acoustic or folk oriented label, and one of the great labels. They put out so much great stuff. This is from 1979, Flying Fish Records out of Chicago, and this is a Red Clay Ramblers album, and that's Chuckin' the Frizz, it's called, Red Clay Ramblers. And I think they would easily be described as a folk band, and Flying Fish as a folk label. But we've shown you a lot, Folkways, and of course, others have mentioned Rounder. I'm sure there's a Rounder record or two in here somewhere, but lots of different labels that would meet that bill. Okay, and he said, Mazzy said, 50s, 60s, and 70s protest songs. Well, instead of doing those particular decades, I thought I would do, just a few different decades, go a little more modern on some of it. Not modern on this one, but from the Woodstock soundtrack, of course, Country Joe and the Fish starts out side 2 with the Fish cheer, I feel like I'm fixing to die rag, which is, a protest song for sure. 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. 5, 6, 7, open up the pearly gates. So a protest song, a sing-along protest song. And then I'll go a couple of years later, the debut album of John Prine. And there's a couple of songs on here you could consider protest songs. Your Flag Decal Won't Get You Into Heaven Anymore would be one. Let's see. Illegal Smile, maybe. You could find a way to do that. Sam Stone, maybe. Anti-war. But Paradise is the one I'm picking from this. 5th song on side 1, Paradise, which has kind of been taken up as a very common song and played as a folk song now. Protest against the environment, against destroying the environment. They found it was cheaper to get up there and just cut the tops off the mountains to get to the coal rather than digging in to get to the coal. And they just, ruined the landscape. And Paradise, great song. Okay. And then the last protest song I'll show you is an album that's got right many protest songs on it. Rhiannon Giddens. Don't hear many people talking about Rhiannon Giddens on the in the vinyl community, but I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with Brianna, you really need to dig into her catalog. Nothing special about the vinyl. Here's black vinyl, and Just a good picture there of her and bandmates on there. And protest songs on here. One she penned with Joey Ryan at the purchaser's option, song about slavery. And Julie, she wrote by herself, song puts you in the world of a slave at the end of the American Civil War. Birmingham Sunday, of course, would be obvious protest songs. These first two I mentioned, they're not obvious, but they're talking about man's treatment of man, how inhumanity to man, that sort of thing. Better Get It Right the First Time is also on side one, and she wrote this with Dirk Powell, who works with her a lot, and her nephew, Justin Harrington, I believe, who's a young man who's African American, obviously, and not obviously, but he is African American, and it's about the risk of being at the wrong place at the wrong time and being black and getting shot. So better get it right the first time. You better make sure what you're doing is justified. And let's see, I'm just looking. She does Statler's, Staple Singers on here too, I believe. I don't see it. Freedom Highway, yeah, Pop Staples. Pop Staples did that, Freedom Highway, and of course that's the title track on there. So that's a 2017 album from Brianna Gibbs. Highly recommend this artist. In the general terms, you call her a folk artist. Blacklisted artists. I was shocked that Mazzy didn't use this one, or Nick, who I saw Nick's as well. It's the only two I've seen. So, of course, I jumped on it very quickly because he's the most well-known of all the people that were blacklisted, I think, in the folk music business. Pete Seeger sings American Ballads on Folkways. What year was this one? 1957. And, of course, he was banned from network television. He was banned, blackballed from a lot. Eventually, he was able to overcome it somewhat, but it definitely, he refused to testify before the Senate committee, refused to kowtow to demagogues. Brave man. I'm sure it cost him financially, but when all's said and done, when you go through the pearly gates, they're not going to ask you what your bank account looked like. They're going to ask you, how did you treat your fellow man? What did you have to show in life? And I think Pete had a lot to offer, and so that's one. And of course, we got to watch out for those demagogues today too. We could be on the verge of losing a democracy if we're not careful with the way some people playing fast and loose with reality. I'll shut up. Let's see. British solo or duo. Duo was difficult for me. I didn't have any Richard Thompson or Richard and Linda on vinyl. So, I'm so provincial that I'm going to, instead of making it British, I'm going to make non-American because, us Americans, we see everything, through that prism. We don't, well, you know what I mean. Okay. So I want to go to Canada, if that's all right, which used to be a British colony. And Ian and Sylvia, great artists. Ian and Sylvia Tyson was their last name. Okay. And before mentioned earlier of these, Four Strong Winds, great song is on here. They do some Gordon Lightfoot. They do Ian Tyson pen songs. Summer Wages. I'm just looking to see if Summer Wages is on here. I think that's my favorite, and it's not. But that is a great folk song if you're familiar If you're not familiar, Google, do a YouTube search for Ian Tyson or Ian Sylvia doing Summer Wages or any of the other versions. There's some great versions out there. Okay, British folk band. I was able to do that one. And I'll show Steel Eye Span, Pleased to See the King. I was going to do Fairport Convention, but Mazzy did that one, so I wanted to do somebody else, some other group. And this is an album from 1971. I guess you could do Renaissance. They were kind of a folk prog rock British band. And, okay, folk rock album. There you go. Great artwork, isn't it? Music from Big Pink. And I think this I could use this as electric too, but I think this epitomizes what folk music's all about. They went down to the basement in this house they were renting in the Woodstock area of upstate New York, and they started writing and playing with Dylan and alone, and that's how they came up with this. They do Tears of Rage, the Dylan song, and songs that Robinson and Manuel wrote. They do Long Black Veil, country song, and I just wish the other members had kept on writing like Robertson did, Robbie Robinson, but kind of got lost there for a while. Okay, so that's my folk rock album. A folk song covered by a rock band. Well, you could go in all kinds of directions on this one, but from 1969, the Rolling Stones did a lot of blues. They do Love in Vain on this one, the Robert Johnson song. And I think we can easily consider that a folk song. And number 18, a Dylan cover. I was looking for one that wasn't an obvious color, like Don't Think Twice or something like that. And Tony Rice, the late great Tony Rice, late great guitarist and vocalist, he loved Bob Dylan's writing. Even more so, he loved Gordon Lightfoot's writing, and he recorded so many from Gordon Lightfoot, and he's recorded right many from Dylan too. So from this album by Tony Rice, this is Me and My Guitar. On this album, he does Sweetheart Like You, the Dylan song. He said, this song leaves a lot open to personal interpretation. Dylan's music has always been unique, and to me, this song is another of his masterpieces. Recording this piece was a unique experience for me and one that was a challenge to execute the way it is presented here. I'm sure his music will live forever. Very well said, I'd say. I mentioned Lightfoot. He does Early Morning Rain from Lightfoot on here, 16 miles. Just shows you how much he loves Lightfoot. Walls by Lightfoot. Song for a Winter's Night by Lightfoot. Fine as Fine Can Be. Like half the songs on this. There's 12 songs there. About half of them are Gordon Lightfoot's. He does a Dylan, he does a Norman Blake, does a James Taylor. He does some he wrote as well. He wasn't major emphasis on songwriting. Okay. Favorite cover. Okay. Here's my favorite cover, I believe. Folk albums really usually don't have great covers. But this is the Old Time Fiddling at Union Grove, the 38th Old Time Fiddlers Convention at Union Grove, North Carolina, on Prestige Folklore. And I love that photograph right there. I think that's a great photograph. Let me get it closer and see. Okay. Yeah, Prestige Folklore is what that album is on, and that is from 1964. I've got a bunch of those Union Grove live recordings, field recordings, I guess you could call them. I could have used them up there in question number 2. And folk song, my favorite folk song. Wildwood Flower, of course. So that does it for my version of the folk music 2021 tag. And I'll just remind everybody, be kind to your neighbors, because guess what, folks? We're all neighbors.